I think the Beryl roller coaster is finally coming to a close, but it's been a wild ride. I'm MWG and let's get right into the tropical update where we now have Tropical Storm Beryl. That's right, it is no longer a hurricane, and what has taken place over the past 24 hours has sure been interesting. Or the past 36 hours with Beryl. Beryl was a tropical wave off Africa around 5 days ago. For around 2 of those days, it was just hanging out, going across the Atlantic, starting to get a low convection together, and then all of a sudden, Invest 95L, then tropical depression, tropical storm, and all of a sudden an eye formed. And when that eye formed, it looked like a hurricane, and so the National Hurricane Center gave it 80 miles per hour winds. That was the peak of its intensity, and then all of a sudden today it completely shattered. But what you have to know about Beryl is that it's such a small system, and when it's such a small system, let me just show you this comparison quick. Beryl is so small that if you blink, you're not going to see it. When it was a hurricane, its hurricane wind field was only about 10 to 15 miles long. If you put that on some US cities, what I'm showing you right now, it's nothing. And when you have a small hurricane or just tropical system like that, it could strengthen very fast, but it also means it's super fragile and anything can hurt it. Like just a little bit of wind shear and a little bit of dry air and then that thing's dead. And that's what we saw from Beryl earlier today. The convection completely left it. All it was the bare center just circling around, which looks lovely by the way, but that's not a tropical storm at all. I don't know why when you look at the satellite imagery and there's no thunderstorms near the center, how that could be a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. I don't know what you were thinking there, National Hurricane Center, but that definitely wasn't it. Right now, Beryl isn't the only system in the Atlantic. There's also Tropical Depression 3. And Tropical Depression 3 was Invest 96L. And when it was an Invest 96L, it also had that no convection, low pressure look to it. It was just spinning with no convection. And that's what Beryl looked like today. But somehow, Invest 96L was labeled an Invest, and Beryl was labeled a tropical storm. I don't know what was the National Hurricane Center doing there. But in the past few frames, Beryl has popped up some convection near its center, but it's still not a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, because that's what the National Hurricane Center is labeling Beryl right now, a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. I see it as a tropical depression, a tropical wave right now, not a tropical storm. But the reason that Beryl went from tropical wave to hurricane and then from hurricane to tropical wave so fast in a matter of like 36 hours is because it's now encountering those harder conditions. Beryl was in a pretty good environment. Decent water temperatures, little to no shear, and the moisture layer was there. It had its moisture all around it, but now since it's starting to head a little north, it's interacting with that dry Saharan air, and it's getting some wind shear from the west to the east. So while Beryl is traveling fast to the west, it's getting wind shear going against it, and that's blowing away all of the convection. That's why it's looking like a tropical depression. And all this news that Beryl is now facing that wind shear and that dry Saharan air is great news, because it's no longer a hurricane, it no longer has that tiny eye, and it's looking like a tropical wave. So the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola aren't going to deal with that much of a tropical system. But still, Beryl right now is a tropical storm, and it's most likely going to keep that convection with it over the next couple of days. It's not going to completely fall apart, but the conditions for it to become a hurricane are definitely not there anymore. Thank you, because Puerto Rico and all those islands devastated by Hurricane Irma and Maria do not need another hurricane. But there are tropical storm watches in effect for the Lesser Antilles islands of St. Lucia and Martinique. And going north of those two islands, there's tropical storm warnings for Dominica and Guadeloupe. And going north of those islands, there's tropical storm watches for Montserrat, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis. Oh, those names got me for sure. But as of right now, Beryl is expected to come into the Lesser Antilles as a weak tropical storm as of Sunday night, early Monday morning, and it's gonna face that wind shear and the dry air leading up to that event. And shortly after, it brings some just light wind and rain to the islands, not much more than just a regular thunderstorm that you probably daily expect in those places. And then it's gonna proceed to head towards Puerto Rico, which would normally be a heavy worry, but it's just gonna be a tropical depression at that point. It might not even exist at that point. the low level circulation might be completely ripped up by the wind shear at that point. So for Puerto Rico and all of the Lesser Antilles to Puerto Rico's east, they're barely going to get Beryl at all. It's just going to be some light wind and rain for a couple of hours, and that's it. Nowhere near Hurricane Irma and Maria. Nowhere near there. There was a situation that I wanted to see what Beryl was going to do. I wanted to see what the models are doing, and I think I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen with Beryl after Hispaniola. Because that's the question. After Hispaniola, what happens to the center? Right now, all the models are pointing right at Puerto Rico, and then as soon as after it hits Puerto Rico, it's going to land in Hispaniola, which is probably going to disrupt the center and practically kill it. If it survives that, it's going to continue its west-northward trend for just a tiny bit, and then it's going to really truly start to head north and truly make that curve around the high pressure that's steering it right now. But what's interesting about the models right now with Beryl is that after it makes that curve, after about 72 hours into the future, some of the intensity guidance models are pointing that it's going to strengthen a little bit, and that's what the European model is doing. The European model is developing Beryl back into a tropical storm. Do I think the models have a terrible grip with Beryl right now? Yes, because it's so small and it's just not the typical tropical system or tropical hurricane. So do I think it's going to survive that heavy wind shear, that dry Saharan air, Hispaniola and Puerto Rico's land? I don't think it's going to survive any of that. So I think it's going to die after it hits Hispaniola. And I mean hits. So Florida, we're practically off the hook, which is good. What is not good though is that this is July 7th and we've already had Beryl, but there's a lot more to go. And that's still in the tropical Atlantic because we're about to be dealing with another tropical storm, and that's going to be named Chris. Right now, future Chris is right now Tropical Depression 3, which was once Invest 96L, and this is just a storm that's lingering off the Carolinas right now and is not really choosing one specific center. As of right now, if you look at the satellite imagery, it's not just one cohesive spin like Beryl. At least Beryl has one center. But with TD3, it's kind of these multiple spinning things inside this huge convection storm that is just hanging out in the Carolinas. And until that figures out, it's not going to strengthen. But as of right now, it's dealing with moderate shear. The water temperatures are definitely conducive for development. But the thing is until it picks at one center, it's not going to strengthen. But how TD3 is getting steered right now is these two high pressures working against each other. One over the Atlantic Ocean and then one over the Midwest. So that's why TD3 isn't going to move for the next couple of days. So about 24 hours, the worry is that if Chris kind of makes its meander right near or right on the coast of the Carolinas, that's going to bring a ton of rain to the Carolinas. But right now, it's farther off the coast and it's going to stay like that. The National Hurricane Hunters flew into TD3 today and they just found a mumbled storm at a pressure of 1014 millibars, which is high. TD3 is not a strong system right now and it's not going to affect any lands in the US, and it might only possibly affect Newfoundland as a extra tropical system. But before it hits Newfoundland in about a week from now, it's going to probably strengthen to a hurricane or just a high level tropical storm, but just off the coast, not affecting any land. So while the past 40 hours in the Atlantic has been hectic, we have been finally figuring this out, and everything has practically been finalized in this video. We know what's going to happen. But just because we know what's going to happen right now does not mean things might have to change over the next few days. And with how sporadic Beryl has been, just because it's such a fragile small system, it could very well just strengthen to a hurricane yet again. Highly unlikely, but it is possible. So just quickly wrapping things up, Beryl is going to affect the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico on a Sunday night to Tuesday morning time frame. And TD3, soon to be Chris, is just going to hang around the Carolinas until it starts moving fastly to the northeast. Thank you for watching this video. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one for another tropical update.